The story of Old Coppernose, or as you might know him, King Henry VIII. You might also know him for his most famous controversies, the way his wives died, or his famous and now permanent break from the Catholic Church in Rome. But he was then known for something else, his insatiable appetite for spending on luxury, on self-indulgence, and on war, which would mean he'd regularly run out of money. And this had a number of inconveniences. One, earlier King John had signed on to this thing called the Magna Carta, this old document that made it impossible for the kings to raise taxes without the support of the commoners who had to pay for it. So he needed creative ways to get around it. And so let me quote from a great book called This Time is Different by Rogoff and Reinhardt. For economists, Henry VIII of England should be almost as famous for clipping his kingdom's coins as he was for chopping off the heads of his citizens. Despite inheriting a vast fortune from his father, Henry VII, now does that remind you of anybody inheriting a fortune from his father? And even after confiscating the church's assets, he found himself in such desperate need of funds that he resorted to an epic debasement of the currency. The debasement began in 1542 and continued through the end of Henry's reign in 1547 and on into that of his successor, Edward VI. Cumulatively, the pound lost 83% of its silver content during this period. Now, what does that mean? It was hard to create extra coins for a British king at the time, an English king, because, of course, those coins were made of silver. After all, the word pound comes from the equivalence of 1 pound of silver. Every British coin was originally worth a pound of silver. Anything less than a pound of silver was actually cheating. But if you want to create more coins and you don't have any more silver, what is a broke king to do? Well, Henry came up with a clever idea. He would take some of the coins to a secret place and have his minting officials melt them down, and he would re-mint them with almost no silver left in the coins at all. He would have copper inside the coins and only a very thin layer of silver on the outside, so that when the coins were originally issued, no one would really know whether they were silver or something else. Well, that little tiny secret hidden in so many countless English coins would slowly be revealed by the color of the king's nose. Of course, his image was on the front of the coin, and because he was such an egomaniac, he had his image, his face, looking forward. Now, what that meant is that his nose would protrude out of the coin, and it would be the first part of the coin to rub against the inside of a pocket or against a money sack or any other friction that would go on throughout the day. And so that part of the silver would be first to rub off, leaving him with a copper red nose. Not a nose caused by the gout from too much drinking, as was common among kings, including himself, but due to his own indulgence with money. And so he became known, infamously, as Old Coppernose. You could tell by the red on his nose that he was robbing the commoners of their money. And of course, the consequence of having the debasement of the British pound was higher prices for the basic staples of society. So let me quote here a blog from the Royal Mint. Debasing caused prices to go up to compensate for the fact that the money was worth less. Or I can quote Dr. Y.S. Brenner, who said, each of the debasements of the coinage was followed by rising prices. Or C.W.C. Oman from the Royal Historical Society, Henry's depreciated coinage was followed by an immediate rise in the price of most staple commodities in spite of his absurd ordinance to the contrary. He thought he could pass a law banning prices from going up, even though he was the one driving those price hikes in the first place with his ridiculous creation of these copper fraudulent and counterfeit coins. Now, here in Canada, we've seen our central bank increase the supply of our coins, bills, and bank deposits by 20%, over $300 billion of newly created Canadian dollars in just over a year. This is the largest increase since 1974, which led to the massive inflationary crisis of the 80s. Now, when you think about it, a 20% increase in the number of coins in circulation, number of Canadian dollars in bank accounts, bills, and coins, is not that different in scale than the great debasement of our friend King Henry VIII. Of course, his debasement was, over the course of about 5 years, 83%. Well, Justin Trudeau's debasement here in Canada has been 20% in 1 year. So do the math. We're on the trajectory, almost, not quite, but on the same trajectory if the government keeps creating cash to pay its bills. Now, of course, like in Henry's time, most of the money that Trudeau's creating is going to the rich. Back in Henry's time, he gave the money to his friends inside the king's court, to his most loyal soldiers, and to members of his aristocratic family. I mean, Trudeau has been giving the money disproportionately to his friends as well. And even the cash payments that have gone out have gone disproportionately to the wealthy. In fact, the richest quintile of families have received on average $6,700, and the poorest only $4,000. So even though the poor lost more, they got less, significantly less than the very rich. And thus it is when governments and banks and kings create new currency. It's always the wealthy that benefit. And we see it as well with the inflation of assets. Real estate is up 30% over 1 year. That helps, of course, mention dwelling millionaires, but hurts working class renters and young people who can't afford a home. The cost of food and fuel are up. Now, these costs constitute a very small part of the household budget for a very rich family, but constitute very high costs for a poor or a working class family. And then don't forget that when this cash is created by the central bank, it's done in a way that benefits financial institutions. They originally buy the government's debt, and then the central bank buys it back from them at a profit. So that means that the banks, the insurance companies, and other massive financial institutions are the first to touch this new cash and the most positioned to profit from it. And of course, the inflation tax that results falls hardest on the shoulders of the working poor who must bear the burden. That is why I am fighting hard against the inflation tax, to restore the value of our currency, to end the debasement and protect your purchasing power. To be honest with the people, and if the government wants to bring forward a tax increase, they should bring it to the House of Commons so that the people's representatives vote on it and are accountable for it, rather than, as Old Coppernose did, try to sneak it through a clever, cunning process that is done when they think no one is looking. And that is what I am bringing to light, and how I am working to fight for you and for the soundness of our money and the value of your wages and the dignity of your work. Thank you.